Morning,
Richard.
afternoon, evening, nighttime even.
Good morning, Anuj. Good morning, Barney, Kerry. Love to see you on. Richard, how's it going?
Good. Good to be here.
Absolutely. Richard, where are you based these days? Are you in Cheshire?
Yeah, so I'm in Cheshire. Our head office at Iceland is just over the border in North Wales on sunny Deeside Industrial Estate. Not massively glamorous, but yeah, it's we've been there a couple of decades now, and the operation's really grown. So we've got about 800 people on site. So it's a big big operation.
Wow.
Very good. More people joining. Where are you coming in from? Hi, Keith. Good to see you again. Not so sunny Tame, East London. You folks from the UK this morning, hopefully, but maybe everyone's sort of summer holidays mode.
Indeed. Well, Mark is off for the next couple of weeks, guys. So he's going to be dialing in next week with his sunglasses and hopefully sunny France. Isn't that true, Mark?
Yeah, I just got to get my 15-year-old through a lateral flow test to escape. Then we'll see what happens.
I'm sure you'll be absolutely fine. Guys, look, it's 2 minutes past 8, and we know what it's time for another episode of the Places We'll Go show. So why don't we get kicked off for this morning? Good morning, everybody. And as you know, I'm Richie, and I'm with my co-host, Mark Evans, for I really genuinely think going to be a very exciting session with another stellar guest this morning. To be honest with you, I think today is going to be really special in many ways. First of all, we are joined by somebody who really needs no introduction. Richard Walker is the MD of Iceland, one of Britain's fastest growing and most innovative retailers. And he's going to tell us, I'm sure, a little bit about that journey. Second, we're going to hear a story that will no doubt inspire all of our sort of sustainability and conscious minds, as Iceland really is at the forefront of community and environmentally conscious retailing. Just to give you an example, they've actually made a pledge to stop using plastic packaging in all their own label products by 2023. Richard, I'm going to quiz you on that one and see how you're getting on.
Yeah.
And then finally, you're going to get to hear Richard's own journey, which I think is going to be really interesting, as how he is taking the helm at Iceland, and obviously some of the trials and no doubt tribulations of being such a young leader in a family-run organization. And just before we get kicked off, I've got to say that I really do admire Richard on so many levels. Look, he took a really bold decision to kind of leave his sort of safe and secure job in finance to be part of Iceland back in the day. And he really has transformed this organization around the concept of sustainability, something that has been genuinely close to his heart, even as early on in his university years when he did his degree in geography. So, you know, if you want to learn more about Richard's philosophy, he's even written a book. I think it came out last year, Richard, if I'm not mistaken.
Came out April this year.
There we go. April this year, guys. Buy it on Amazon. It's called The Green Grocer. And so if you want to learn more about sustainable retailing, I think that would be a fantastic read to get your hands on. So, Richard, great pleasure. It's just super to have you on this morning to learn a little bit more about yourself and your philosophy. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Mark, over to you for the first question.
Thank you, Richie. Yeah, fantastic to have you on the show, Richard, to hear from you and your journey and learnings. We'll get warmed up with the obvious question. Last 18 months has been a bit hairy. How's the pandemic affected Iceland and affected you?
Well, look, it's been a tragedy on so many levels, of course, and touched every family. And of course, it's been very difficult in different ways. However, for our business, the reality is our sales have gone up. You know, we through lockdown were one of the few businesses that was allowed to stay open and keep trading. In many cases, the only shop on the high street that was open. And as a result, you know, everyone came to us. That's the reality. However, it's not been easy because we had to deal with unprecedented panic buying, our shelves being stripped bare at the height of all of that about this time last year, and then we had to adjust to the strange new normal of social distancing and keep our supply lines running. And every month there's a different challenge. You know, now we have a shortage of HGV drivers in this country. So again, we're starting to see stock issues on the shelf. But our team have been nothing short of heroic. You know, we've got 30,000 staff now, and they don't have the option of working from home. And, you know, they've had to go into work, to the shops, day in, day out, and keep the show on the road throughout. And they've done an amazing job.
Yeah, on the HGV drivers, we had Ed Smith from Amazon on the other day, 35% growth year on year. And I think Amazon's scooping up loads of people who are qualified drivers from all of the businesses. So there's clearly a crunch.
Yeah.
In terms, just to close out the personal bit. So, you know, we see you in your home surroundings. Just, you know, what do you think you've learned about yourself and as a leader?
To be honest, our lives have been probably, or my working life has probably been less affected than most, because we've actually kept our head office open throughout because we're an essential retail service. So yeah, I did quite a lot of home working in the first lockdown, but then yeah, we've pretty much had a sense of normality since this time last year. And nevertheless, I think we have learned a lot. We've learned in terms of our 850 people on head office. You know, we've learned how to be a bit more flexible. That home working is a thing. That, you know, we've probably modernized ourselves and our outlook a bit. And I think that's to the benefit of the organization. I also think it's shown how kind of resilient and robust we are because of our frontline colleagues. Like I said, just how hard they've worked and how they've managed to deal with all the different issues that have been thrown at us. Yeah, I think, you know, I look to the future very positively. I think we've got a long way to go. There's still issues like HGV drivers. There's issues like the pandemic, which is something which is a big problem in the UK with the NHS app kind of randomly pinging people and telling them to self-isolate at home, which means that we can have whole kind of store teams that are wiped out overnight pretty arbitrarily. And trying to manage that has been a real challenge. But I think we're tougher because of it. We've kept the show on the road throughout, and we look forward to a different business, which will be much more heavily skewed online. Our online offering has grown fivefold since the start of the pandemic. Some of our shops are now glorified pick centres where we pick from store, and actually we don't have that many customers coming through the doors every day. So we have a very, very different business, but we pivoted and we've kept agile and we've managed to keep going.
Richard, I want to kind of take the corporate veil down for 1 minute and talk about you as an individual. Like, look, honestly, you are, you know, an inspirational, young, charismatic leader, but at the same time has probably got the weight of the world on his shoulders in many respects, trying to, especially through this period, being able to navigate this really difficult situation, keep it going. And also, as you say, an essential retailer. So not just from an economic point of view, but actually from a macro point of view as well, playing a really important role, getting Britain through this pandemic and doing it so well. How's the personal toll been on you? I mean, what are those reflections? I mean, has it been a challenge? Have you learned things through that period? What's it been like?
Yeah, it has been a challenge. Obviously, I wouldn't kind of ever make out that, you know, I'm single-handedly doing all this. It's far from it. Actually, I'm a consummate delegator, and I think that is really important when you get to a high managerial level. And very fortunate that we have an amazing team around us who have managed to do the work. But of course, it has been stressful. I think it's really important to kind of bucket up different aspects of your life. So. If you're purely focused on work, I think, you know, your mental health will start to suffer, and your well-being starts to suffer. So, you know, I look at my life in three different buckets. There's obviously the work context, which actually isn't just Iceland. I'm chairman of the property company that I founded, and I have a few different hats that I wear, sitting on trustees of a couple of different environmental charities, etc. But then there's also family. I think it's really important to carve out time. You know, I've got two young kids and a wife, and it's important to make time for them. And then personal. And for me, you know, surfing, running, climbing, they're things that I love. And I'm a worse leader if I don't invest time in myself as well. So I never get it perfect. I never get those three kind of things in perfect alignment where everything's awesome. But I know that if I don't invest in all of them, then everything suffers.
Yeah, good to see the balance, and you're very clear about those three components. Now, let's just get everyone up to speed about how you got to where you are now. So if you can look in the rearview mirror for a moment and just what's the dots that have joined to get you to this role through your career?
Yeah, well, that's why I was keen to write the book. And actually, that was another kind of catharsis through lockdown, actually, because it was a real sort of way to put all my thoughts on the page. But yeah, I suppose it's been a highly unusual journey because Mum and Dad started Iceland, and they started it 51 years ago. Mum thought of the name, and I sat around the dining room table every night, listening to Dad talk about tales of growing this business, which it has become the biggest business in Wales. It was started from one small shop. He borrowed 30 quid from his mum to set up and pay for the first month's rent in this tiny little shop, not much bigger than this room, in Oswestry in Shropshire in 1970. And then it's grown and grown. Like I said, 30,000 staff. We turn over £4 billion a year now. We serve 5 million customers a week, and it's a family business. And it hasn't always been a family business. It's been a public business, traded on the stock market. Dad was kicked out for a period of time. It's been owned by other people, but now it's firmly back in our control. I think my journey was one where I actually wanted to avoid working for Iceland. It was never discussed. I was very keen to plough my own furrow. So I traveled extensively after uni because I love places and people. But I got on the graduate scheme of a company called Jones Lang LaSalle, now called JLL. And that was in London, doing commercial property. And I trained up as a chartered surveyor. And then I moved to Poland and I set up my own property investment business there, backed by Lehman Brothers, who went bust. And then we had to unravel all of that. But we managed to kind of trade through it, and we grew a big portfolio and management platform there, which we sold, and we moved back to London, did the same thing again. So I did that for sort of 10, 15 years and was pretty successful. And I think that was really important to prove it to other people, but most importantly to myself, that I could succeed on my own account. And I'm so glad I didn't just kind of jump straight into the family business, not that it was ever really discussed. But I remember chatting to Dad in my early 30s, this would have been 2012, 2013, saying, I want to give Iceland a go. And he said, oh, don't bother, collect rents. It's much easier. And I don't know if that was reverse psychology or truth. It was probably a bit of both. But I did, we decided I'd do it. And I spent a year stacking shelves in shops in London, which was the toughest year of my life, but amazing because you learn about the business from the ground up. And it was humbling. You appreciate how hard people work, and you learn so much in terms of leadership and how to galvanize a team. And then eventually I moved to head office, and I've had loads of different roles and became managing director in a year or two ago.
Yeah. Richard, it's really, I started my career doing something similar in terms of shop floor, getting to the ground with it. And I think the exposure and experience that you get is something that never leaves you. And you develop a sense of empathy for how everything happens ground up, which I think really just, gives you a sense of how customers go through various things in the journey, which I'm sure has held you in great stead.
I think that's a great word for it, actually, empathy. You really appreciate it. From head office, we often beam down from upon high these decisions without really thinking through the practicalities of the impact on our store teams. So it's really important to think that, and also empathy for the customers. Iceland serves some of the most deprived communities around the UK. We have 1,000 stores now all over Britain, but some of our locations are in very, very poor communities. And I always say, every politician should spend some time working on the high street in Iceland's wherever, because you get to see real life.
It is absolutely true. I want you to join one more dot for us around you talked about the need to create your own stamp and mark, and you certainly have done that in so many ways, but perhaps probably one of the biggest, most notable ways was in the way that you've transformed Iceland into thinking much more around sustainability and, quite honestly, really leading the way in terms of a high street retailer being able to do this when it comes to thinking about future generations, both social conscious but environmentally conscious stuff too. So how did you join that dot? How did that sort of come to pass, that you were able to achieve that?
I think, it's something I've always been interested in growing up, walking in the hills and doing lots of, like I said earlier, surfing and climbing and stuff. I've been long-term Greenpeace member. It's something, for whatever reason, I've always just been very interested in the environment and sustainability. But there was a bit of a penny drop moment, if I'm honest, where I was wondering how I'm going to put my own stamp on this organisation. Impossible shoes to fill with my legendary founder, Sir Dad. And, it's really about finding your own niche. But it sort of, it really hit me that, the growing kind of urgency of the climate emergency, the destruction of the natural world. Actually, Iceland could be a really good platform to try and drive positive change and behavior on this, and also an unusual platform. Like I said, we serve the poorest communities around Britain, and our customers, quite frankly, can't afford the luxury of paying more for ethical products. Normally, people would associate kind of environmentalism with like Waitrose customers and the middle classes and stuff. But I was very keen, because the environmental debate is very middle class and it's very much in its little silo and its bubble. And actually, if we can make it relevant and relatable to everyone, then that is super exciting, because then that is genuinely scalable. And if we can come up with solutions that are palm free or plastic free or whatever for our customers, then that genuinely is exciting, because then you can properly change the world. So yeah, I was very keen to use the business as a platform, because also it's about purpose. And I wouldn't be happy, quite frankly, if I got to my deathbed and had opened another 1,000 stores and grown sales by 4 billion again. As ridiculous as that sounds, actually, it's not trying to emulate my dad or what's been before, but actually using it for something that I think our customers care about and that can drive some change.
That's
just one thing, just so you know, a couple of comments. One from Keith coming in. Totally agree. I started on the shop floor as a trainee manager at Dixon's as well. So relatable shop floor moments going on in the chat. Sorry, over to you, Mark.
No, it's okay. I was going to say there's a lot of talk about purpose, and it's great to see real intent and the genuine nature of it. I'm just going to pick up on something you said, Richard, about success. I needed to be successful to prove it to others and to prove it to myself. I worked for 10 years at Mars, and the Mars brothers, John Forrest and Jackie, who owned the company, had a weird relationship in that they felt they were merely custodians because the family that had gone before. Tell us a little bit more about how you came to grips with the fact that you were taking over from your father, your parents. It must be a bit odd.
Oh, totally. And that year in shops, people often ask, like, what was it like? Did they know who you were? And of course they did, because I wasn't going to lie to them. But it was only awkward for about an hour. And then you just roll up your sleeves and get stuck in, and you're one of the team. And I think I've always tried to kind of, keep that mentality throughout whatever role I do, however senior I do it. Respect is earned. And also, I think, people... I've got to remember that I don't deserve the job just because of my name. I've got to earn it, and if I'm not good enough to do the actual job, then that's entirely different to being a shareholder of Iceland. And it's about separating those two different things. Family businesses are very different as well. So Mars, I believe, is like a 5th, 6th generation setup where it keeps getting passed down through the family, and they have like hundreds of cousins now who are shareholders. I mean, we're still kind of 1st to 2nd generation. So perhaps not quite as kind of cumbersome in terms of our shareholding structure. And actually, we try and use it to our benefit. The fact that we're private means that we can think long term. And that means that we can make very big, bold pledges like removing plastic, because I often say if I was the boss of Tesco, I'd be sacked by now, because we're loading up millions of pounds of cost. But of course, they're a public company and they have to think short term, because they have to keep churning out quarterly profit increases to appease city shareholders, whereas we're only answerable to ourselves. So we have this phrase long term greedy. And as long as we do the right thing, for the long term, then the profits will follow. And that's kind of our mentality.
Richard, I've got to ask if your dad's initial advice around it's easy to say to take rents versus going and joining up in Iceland. Would that be similar advice you give to your kids when the time comes?
Oh, that's a good question. Not been asked that before. Retail is a very hard game. I mean, it's relentless. It's rough and it's tough, and you've got to wake up every morning and want to go to war with the competition. We operate on very thin margins, but I don't think any business is easy. The property business is a commercial property developer. I mean, through lockdowns and with the rise of home working, that's not been easy either. So I don't think there's anything as a free ride. Whatever industry you're in, you've got to give it your all. And to give it your all, you've got to be passionate and committed. So you've got to do what you love, or else there's no point. Life's not a rehearsal. So it's definitely worth taking time and sort of searching around for what you want to do.
Can I just make a reflection on that point? Sorry, just to dive in. It took you a long time to find out that this is what you love, though. And I think that's really particularly interesting. And when thinking about the younger generations, there's a sense of impatience that usually typically comes through. And yet, actually, you went almost around the world to come back to where you started. And I just think that's really kind of interesting as an insight in itself about your behavior, about finding that passion. Maybe there's something to be said around that.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, and it's true. And it almost kind of came all the way back round to that dining room table. And I never thought it would, but yeah, I think it's about being long term and taking the long view, and also sort of appreciating that not every day is awesome. There's always tough days, and sometimes there's way more tough days than good days. And actually, the job. 90% of it is boring minutiae, and I think that's the same for pretty much everything. We're not always saving the world, or going to Indonesia and walking through rainforests and meeting alternative packaging manufacturers to plastic and investing in kind of cutting edge technologies. That's the super cool stuff. But it's pretty mundane, actually. Like running a big operation like Iceland, it's endless kind of analysis and data. And I think it's really important to appreciate that. Whatever job you're doing, there's a lot of boring stuff as well. But you've got to recognise that and not think everything will always be brilliant.
Sure. So true. Not every day is awesome, and there'll be some tough days. You mentioned about Lehman Brothers, so you must have had some really tough days along the way. Are there any that stand out, and what did you learn from them?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was awful. Like, I was out in Poland, and on paper we'd made a lot of money because we were investing kind of quite early on in the commercial property curve. But then everything stopped and liquidity dried up and no one was interested, and we were left with all these assets. And I thought I'd lost fortunes, and Lehman went bust, so we had to extricate ourselves from that relationship, which was very complicated. And we were just sort of treading water for quite a long time, sat over in Poland. And I remember trying to pay a bank back, and they were unpayable because no counterparty bank was willing to take the risk that, this bank might go bust in the meantime. So there were some very, very strange things at that time. And I felt pretty lonely, actually, sat out there in Poland. The irony is, when we finally did kind of collapse everything and close it down, we didn't make a single penny, having on paper made loads of money, a couple of years previously when we first started. But it was the best thing we did because it sat us out of the UK market. I think if I'd have been investing at this, at the same time period, but in the UK market instead, we would have lost fortunes. So again, it was about kind of long-termism. And it turns out that whole Poland experience financially was kind of for practice, really. But we came out unscathed. We didn't make a loss. And what we did was build up a load of relationships and experience and confidence to then jump back into the UK market. We set up a new fund in 2009, just when everything was like on the floor. And that meant that we could go in and pick up some bargains. But it didn't feel like that, in the lonely winter of Warsaw, 2008 or wherever it was.
Richard, I really appreciate you saying that and really kind of being a bit honest and transparent around that sentiment, emotion, and feeling at that time, because too many people have a misconception about the jazzy world of entrepreneurship and what actually it actually culminates in. And to come out the other side recognizing that at that point, complete low, not basically earning what you thought it would be, but after that just being a test bed for something else. I think that's kind of fascinating in itself. Just so you know, I've got a comment here from Sheila. I love that Richard has crashed the middle classness of green. There's nothing more important than that. So there you go.
She's right.
We've also got a question. There we are. We've got a question coming in, and questions coming in quite steady and fast now. So from Richard. So Richard Brown. Hi, Richard. How's it going? Do you think sustainability means the same to your customers as it does to Waitrose, or something different?
Oh, that's a great question. No, I think it means totally different things to different people. And actually, the word sustainability in the context of business is probably very misguided anyway, because there's no such thing as a sustainable business. You know, Iceland is not a sustainable business. We're far from it. We're a high volume mass market food retailer. There's no business in existence I can think of that puts more back into nature than it takes away from it. And I think the first thing we need to do is be honest about that. And the word sustainability has kind of been hijacked. You know, you can have sustainable everything now, sustainable flying, sustainable growth. That's not true. And we need to sort of come away from those words. I've also found actually internally, sustainability can be a bit divisive. You know, people think, oh, it's the fluffy save the world stuff, and they sort of don't worry about it. And actually what we need to do is just become more responsible. And I say we're a more responsible business. People say, how big is your sustainability department? And I say, well, our responsibility department is 30,000 people. You know, it should be part of everyone's day job and what they do. And certainly from our customers' perspective, to answer the question, that some of them might only have 25 quid a week to spend on food. And unfortunately for them, like, saving the world is not exactly top of their hierarchy of needs. They're just trying to make ends meet. So I think, in many ways, they just want to get in the shop and out the shop as quickly as possible, because they might be cash poor, but they might be time poor as well. And we need to recognize that. So whenever I've tried to shoehorn messages about choose this paper bag as opposed to that plastic bag, wherever I tried to preach about, I know, unwrapping our cucumbers is less convenient, but you should feel good. It never works. But, and I think we need to reframe a lot of the environmental debate to make it relevant and relatable to people. And that is certainly very different for our customers than it is to Waitrose.
You mentioned joining Greenpeace a long while ago. So you've obviously been in this conversation for a long time. So I'm interested to know what was the point of initiation way back when? And then also fast forward to today, what choices do you make in your personal life as relates to your intent for sustainability?
A point of initiation for the business, or
for you joining Greenpeace way back when? Was there a trigger moment or an influence?
Yeah, actually, my dad has been a long-term member. So despite the fact he tells me repeatedly, stop saving the world and get in the shops. He's been a very long-term Greenpeace member and actually led the way on a lot of campaigns, 20, 30 years ago. So Iceland has been this unlikely environmental hero for quite some time. We were the first retailer to ban CFCs from refrigeration, which was causing a hole in the ozone layer, which has since largely healed. It's one of the few positive environmental stories. And we were the first retailer in the world to ban genetically modified ingredients from our own label products. And that was a move that was widely kind of derided at the time, and people said it was impossible or unnecessary. But then every retailer followed us, and a bit like plastics, and it sort of fired the starting gun on that. And it's made the UK's food almost completely GM free to this day. So I was always kind of aware of like the power of business to drive some positive change in that respect.
And then in terms of some of the choices that you make in your own life to accordance with that.
I mean, we're full of contradictions. We will emit more than most people because we're a busy, healthy family, and that's the reality. And is that hypocritical? I suppose it is, but it's honest. But obviously, we try and kind of mitigate it as much as possible. So we don't really eat meat at home. I drive an electric car. We actually have like a sustainability plan as a family, which may be a bit nauseating to some people, but it's like 10 things that we aspire to do to kind of live a cleaner, greener life. And it's small things, but, switching our home heating to a renewable energy supplier called Bulb, where 100% of the electricity you buy is from renewable sources, or not cutting the grass in our garden so that, it attracts more insects and bees and butterflies. So just like basic things like that, going on holiday in the UK. It's quite a fun thing for the kids to engage with as well.
That's lovely. We're with Bulb, and again, it's a bit like the purpose level at Iceland. As a person, as a family, you're putting your money and your actions where your mouth is. So credit to you. Sorry, Richie, back to you.
Trying to.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, right? I just love that answer because it is so flippin' honest. And I think that's just great, and it's probably true of a lot of us about our intent versus some of the reality of action that we take based on lives and context that we have. And I think that's just great the way that you put that forward, Richard. Can I ask? So one of the common themes that I think have come through this conversation is around the influence, impact, and ongoing nature of your relationship with your dad in relation to the business. And I think in many ways it shines through that he's been a bit of a mentor to you and a guiding light in relation to how you've gone about things, and even to this day, apparently clear. I just want to ask, what do you feel has been his role, and more broadly, what do you feel is the role of mentors as people kind of progress through their careers?
Yeah. So, I mean, Dad is an extraordinary individual because he started this thing from scratch. I mean, the consummate entrepreneur. It also means he's highly unusual, as a person, because normal people don't achieve what he's achieved. And that can have kind of good elements and bad elements. But he's always been a great dad. I think maybe it was easier in the generation that I grew up because when he was home, he was home. There was no smartphones. There was no social. There wasn't even kind of home computing for the first half of my childhood. And that created unfortunately, a divide that we just don't have now. And it's 24/7, and that's just the reality. But I was worried at what it would be like going into Iceland and how we would work together because typical father-son relationship. Like personally, we can spar a bit. I mean, I think that's the case for many families. But actually, in the work context, it's been a real pleasure. I've got to be honest, and I think he's had the foresight to sort of give me a bit of space and let me get on with it and trip up and make my own mistakes. I ran a part of our business for a while called the Food Warehouse, which is a very fast-growing kind of retail park format, different to Iceland, but it's got a unique name and identity and customer base, and I think that independence was really important. But I suppose that kind of leads into the second half of your question, which is like, what makes good mentoring? And I think it's about giving confidence and inspiring people to be themselves and the best version of themselves. And the problem potentially that a lot of mentors make, but also a lot of fathers make, is that they want you to be like them, and by default make all the mistakes that they made. And actually, I think that realization that the son isn't the father and is very different, as I have a lot of different outlooks, but also the mentee isn't the mentor, and everyone's an individual, and they've got to be the best version of themselves.
Yeah, your father was clearly an amazing leader. You've also shown great leadership. So we've got a question from Jen Smith. Thank you, Jen. So what top 3 qualities would you say you need to become part of a leadership team?
Oh, Jen, I'm terrible at these top 3 questions because then I always get like to number 2 and then rabbit in the headlights moment, and I have a memory blank with number 3. But I'll give it a go, and if I can't get to 3, I'll think of it later. I think there's kind of a new set of skills perhaps that's required for the 21st century leader as business evolves and society evolves. And I talk about this in the book, that kindness is kind of the currency of 21st century leadership. We talked about empathy before, and I think it's so important to take the time to actually bother to ask people questions and listen to them. And it's startling how many old school leaders are still in that command and control, dictate philosophy, whereas actually, I think empathetic leadership and kindness is so important nowadays, and will actually kind of make for more resilient workforces and businesses going forward. And then probably some of the more expected answers, which is hard work as well.
Richard, I love that the first thing you would say. I mean, it's unexpected, but the very first thing you would say is kindness. But so true. Back to you, Richie.
Thank you. Look, absolutely. Just got a comment here from Sheila. Spot on, Richard. Kindness, empathy, and listening. There we go. Saffron just coming in with another comment here. So I absolutely love the conviction that we need to shift from talking about sustainability to responsibility and taking that on as individuals. Reminded me of Keith Weed on the show previously when he talked about CSR sustainability team at Unilever for exactly this reason. So you're certainly aspiring many sparks there with some of your comments there, Richard. Let me go to another question. Got one from Chirag, who is basically asking, what's Richard's vision and plan for Iceland over the next 3 years?
Oh, do you know what's interesting? We do write business plans. I'm being a bit flippant, but we tend to not be big into strategy and business planning, because as soon as we write it, then it's out of date and we have to change. For example, who'd have thought a global pandemic would come up? But of course, we do have we try and have some foresight in terms of where things are headed. As I referred to earlier, our online business has grown dramatically. We do more online deliveries a week than Ocado now, and we've got capacity to do 100,000 home deliveries a day. So that is a very dramatically different business. So from kind of a structural perspective, I think we'll see more and more online. We'll probably see less footfall on the high street, unfortunately, which is something else that I'm really passionate about. I think the high streets are the fabric of our communities, and it's not just about retail worker jobs, which is of course important as one of the biggest private sector employees. But it's about a sense of place and civic pride and identity, and some of the things that actually are damaging our society. So healthy, vibrant high streets is very important. But unfortunately, with the rise of Amazon, etc., I can't see that tide being turned. Is my blunt assessment. As much as we invest in it, and then I often get asked what our big, our next big campaign is, because we've had so many moments with plastics and palm oil and food waste and carbon and stuff. But I think the reality for the moment is I really don't want the big moment. I just think we need to keep our heads down. We've achieved on removing palm oil, but we have a mountain to climb on plastics. We've reduced tonnage by 50%, but we still have another 50% to go, and that's a much harder 50%. So we need to galvanize everyone around that goal and make sure we try our best to deliver on it.
Yeah, the battle goes on for all of us. And now Christmas advertising in retail, and particularly food retail, is quite a thing in the UK. Not everyone will be aware of this, but it's a huge battleground. Iceland's position in all of that, you've participated and triumphed at some level. So tell us a bit about that time of year from an advertising point of view.
Yeah, I mean, because we're a big business, the numbers I chucked out before, but we're actually only 2.5% of the market. So our proportional spend that we've got on things like Christmas campaigns is nothing compared to Tesco or John Lewis or whatever. But we've always sort of held our own, but they've always been fairly simplistic kind of trading ads with products and a price and a Christmas theme. And actually in 2018, I saw this Greenpeace cartoon, 90 seconds. It was narrated by Emma Thompson, and it was about the plight of a young orangutan who had lost her home because her forest had been destroyed, and she was orphaned and she moved into this girl's bedroom. It was called Rangtang, and it made me cry. I mean, it was just heartbreaking and very poignant, and obviously chimes perfectly with why we were trying to eliminate palm oil. So I thought, well, let's be completely different and dramatic and not have any price, product or brand, and just have that as our Christmas campaign. And so we had months speaking to Clearcast to regulate what can and can't go on TV. And actually, in the end, they came back and said it's banned. You can't run it on terrestrial TV because it's too closely associated with Greenpeace and therefore it's political, etc. And I was gutted. And you talk about these moments where it's not all celebratory. I genuinely thought my personal passion had got in the way of a Christmas ad. We should have gone much more traditional. And to be without a Christmas ad is serious. We take all of our money at Christmas. It's such an important time of year. So it was a very serious problem. But then someone suggested to me, well, this actually might be a good thing. Why don't you just tweet it out, see what happens? So I did. And by the end of the first day, it had tens of thousands of likes. By the end of the first week, it was getting on for 1 million. And now it's become the most watched Christmas ad of all time. It's had over 90 million views, even though it was banned from terrestrial TV, which has also kind of rewritten some of the rules on paid TV advertising. But I think it just really struck a chord. It helped. There was serendipity. Celebrities like James Corden and Stephen Fry and stuff. They all started to jump on board because they were horrified it'd been banned and they wanted to promote the issue. And I was very proud that it raised so much awareness. Before our campaign, no one was talking about palm oil. And then afterwards, Google's searches of the phrase palm oil went up 10,000%. So it was a great piece of corporate activism that ultimately led to new pledges on zero deforestation by some of the world's biggest palm oil operators. It really wasn't a clean fight. It was quite scary at times. I can't go back to Indonesia, for example. But I think it was worth it because it really raised awareness on what is such a critical issue of tropical rainforest deforestation.
Yeah, genius.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm not that clever, actually. It wasn't genius. It was just a genuine case of serendipity. But a lot of people think I'd planned the whole thing and I knew it was going to be banned. But my response is always, if only I were that clever.
Richard, we're clocking out of time here with just 2 minutes remaining. But I just want to quick comment on that. I think it's actually a little bit ahead of the time. And actually I watched a talk this week with Unilever, and then they talked a lot about sort of digital first brands and communications and marketing, and how some of the emerging brands have got no place on television as they achieve exponential growth. And actually what you guys have demonstrated is just the power of what digital can bring to a campaign. I absolutely inadvertently, but still just goes to demonstrate that. So look, out of time, clocked out. Like, I'm just going to do a couple of reflections for myself and then hand over to Mark. First of all, I'm just really going to say that it's just been awesome. I mean, honestly, I love this conversation. It's just been so natural. And I think what you bring is a true sense of that cliched word authenticity, but actually more on just honesty. You're just a person. You're just, someone who's trying to make a difference in the world. And I just love that. Clearly, the busting myths around key leadership positions and how much time it takes, and those 3 buckets that you talked about to begin with, the family, the work, and the personal sort of life, kind of having to have equal share to create something successful in all aspects of your life. I thought that was great. The fact that you've got 2 young kids, I can totally empathize. I've got 2 young kids myself, and I can only imagine what you're going through. I'm not sleeping most nights, so I can relate. The fact that you actually were brave enough to carve out your own path, make those mistakes, learn from Poland, earn no cash or whatever from there, use that as a training ground to then kind of forge your own path into Iceland, and you really kind of made your stamp there with that whole sustainability agenda is genuinely admirable. But also, what's as admirable is the reflection points that you've had along the way to be able to achieve that. It feels like you're very much a long-term guy. It feels like everything you're doing is aimed at that long-term sort of future. The fact that you kind of even talked about how when you're carving out that future, the sustainability and the perception of sustainability is different, but you need to kind of galvanize both your internal organization as well as consumers around you to make it meaningful for them. And that sort of shines through in the campaigns. And you talked about that cucumber example. About how, unwrapping the plastics, talk about sustainability doesn't work. So how do you reframe that conversation for them? The final few things, kindness is leadership, or leadership is being kind to people, which I thought was great. The fact that you don't do insane and intense business planning, but actually it's much more fluid and flexible and agile, which of course your company structure allows you to do. I thought that was really insightful there. And then just finally, I do love the thought that when you said that the high street is the fabric of the community, and that's something that's really close to your heart, and wanting to retain some of that value, although of course in a changing landscape. Richard, just been absolutely awesome. Mark, anything to add?
Thanks, Richie. Yeah, what a joy to have you on, Richard. Richie's mentioned a few things I was going to say, but a couple of things that stood out to me. You started at the beginning by talking about joining and working on the shop floor and the empathy that taught you and how important that's been. I love the expression long-term greedy. I've really appreciated your honesty. You talked about the lonely winter of Warsaw in 2008, but generally your honesty shone through. But the big thing is your congruence. So you've put your and Iceland's money where its mouth is, the 10 things of your family. So I think you're very congruent as a leader in what you do and following your passions. So it's been amazing to have you on, and thank you very much for your time and energy for us and our audience.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind words. I'm a bit humbled. I'm a bit blushed now, but no, that means a lot, and I'm delighted you enjoyed it, and it's been really fun to have this chat.
Well, I know everyone watching and on playback will have greatly appreciated. So thank you again. Just to tee up for next week, very briefly, we've got Vicky Gosling. She's CEO of GB Snowsport, ex-CEO of Invictus. You're in for a thriller there. Vicky's one of her lines is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And also that you need to kick the arse out of life. So that should be fun for next week. But for now, thank you again, Richard. It's been brilliant.